We shouldn't lose sight of what happened in 2021 and just how little support he had for at least, 48 hours inside the Republican Party. But even in months extending after that, the notion that he would be taking the nomination for a third time with a party more united, more in lockstep than it ever has been.
In fact, on the final night of the Republican convention, it is overwhelmingly clear that Donald Trump and the MAGA movement have successfully purged the dissident factions of the Republican Party, particularly any old vestiges of the Republican Party that may have not been in line with it. Take a look around the convention floor and just think about who is not in that room tonight, right? There are 3 living former Republican vice presidents: Dan Quayle, Dick Cheney, and Mike Pence. None of them are there, right? Mike Pence says he won't vote for Donald Trump. Dick Cheney has called him a threat to the Republic. Also absent, the former Republican president before Donald Trump. Remember him? He's not that old. His name is President George W. Bush. He's still around. Also not there, one-time Republican presidential nominee, the guy who was giving this speech in 2012, Mitt Romney. Also absent, high-profile ex-House speakers at the top of the party: Paul Ryan, John Boehner. All of these men were once the backbone of the Republican Party. They have all been removed for being insufficiently pro-MAGA. The most obvious evidence of this transformation is tonight's lineup, leading to Donald Trump's big acceptance speech. Typically, the presidential nominee is introduced by a fellow statesman. So in 2012, rising star and Florida Senator Marco Rubio introduced Mitt Romney. In 2004, the election after September 11th, New York Governor George Pataki, remember that was held in New York, introduced President George W. Bush. Back in 1996, Bob Dole spoke immediately after his own vice presidential nominee, Jack Kemp. So that is usually how it goes. 2024, a very different story. Tonight, taking the stage ahead of Donald Trump's closing speech, we have the head golf pro of the Trump International Golf Club in West Palm Beach, as well as the golf general manager of the Trump National Doral. That's the golf general manager at the Trump National Doral. Also, fired Fox News host Tucker Carlson and Alina Habba, the attorney who lost the case that ordered Trump to pay $83 million in damages to the woman that a jury found liable for sexually assaulting in a dressing room and then subsequently defaming multiple times. Then we're going to hear from 2 stars of the professional wrestling world, Hulk Hogan and President of the UFC, Dana White. You may know White from the 2022 incident caught on camera when he physically assaulted his wife at a nightclub in Mexico. And Kid Rock, of course, will welcome Trump. He also played the 96 RNC with a performance, with a performance of a nearly 25-year-old song. So that's the new Republican Party. McKay Coppins is a staff writer for The Atlantic who joins us live from the convention. George Conway is a conservative lawyer and former Republican who is here with us in New York. And McKay, let's just start with you because you're in the Fiserv Arena right now. It's an important sort of part of the unity, which is that, yes, there is unity, I think, in the Republican Party. It's unity born of a successful purge of any remnant of dissident factions.
And Trump supporters and allies are pretty proud of that fact. In conversations I was having just today, a few hours ago, actually, with some of the delegates, they were kind of saying to me, wow, I'm sure glad Mitt Romney's not here. They knew that I had written his biography. And they're like, I don't think you would fare too well here. And then they started listing off some of those same Republicans you just named. And we're kind of mocking them, laughing at them. There's a sense of not just unity, but kind of triumphalism over the conquest that Trump and his faction has completed over the GOP. I will also just mention quickly that I've been checking in with some of those Republicans who have been exiled from the party this week. And the thing that honestly strikes me the most, that, they're frustrated with some of the things they heard. A lot of them don't like the J.D. Vance pick. But more than anything, the thing that comes through is almost kind of a lack of interest. Like, they are so fully alienated from this party that it almost doesn't feel like something they even need to pay that much attention to anymore because they have no belonging to it. And I think that's a pretty interesting development.
Speaking of which, George Conway sitting here in studio.
Yeah, I don't feel I have any belonging there either. I can't.
You're not there.
I'm not there. I mean, I was there this morning, but I wasn't in the security perimeter. I don't know what kind of reception I would have received if I was there. But this is totally, absolutely an unrecognizable political party, if you can call it a political party. I don't think it's really a political party. I think it's more of a personality cult. That's what it's become. I mean, it's, you have to swear complete loyalty to the leader. And if you don't, well, then you're out, and then you're excluded. And policy really doesn't matter. I mean, here we are. We have, make America great again. OK, let's just give half the world to the Russians and the other to the Chinese. I mean, what are we even talking about here?
George, the fact that the people leading into the former president's acceptance speech tonight are golf pros and UFC fighters tells you a lot about the next administration, but it also gives. I mean, if I'm a potential Trump administration staffer, I'm wondering, okay, we're going to purge the deep state. Who's going to be? I mean, there's this notion that there's going to be a whole new bureaucracy staffed largely by true believers from MAGA world. Is that going to be people with absolutely no institutional or political experience? Because I understand the sort of zeal behind that, but on a practical level, how do you get anything done if it's a bunch of UFC fighters and golf pros in, I don't know, the DOJ?
You send Hulk Hogan down the halls of the Justice Department and get all the prosecutors not to do prosecute the people, your friends. I don't know. I don't know how that's going to work. I think it's just, it's not a serious party, and it's not a party that's interested in governance. It's a party, it's a party that's interested in serving the interests and pleasing the whims of one man who, is very resentful and he's very much wants to wreak vengeance on those people who crossed him.
McKay, you talked about, you used the word triumphalism, which I think is going to be a theme we'll talk about a bit throughout the hour. It's striking to me, one of the sort of clear through lines in all polling, right, is that there's a gender gap. There was a gender gap before Dobbs. There's a gender gap now. Democrats are doing better with women. Republicans doing better with men. You think you would look at that and think, okay, the conventions are an opportunity to get some of those voters, right? So we're doing pretty poorly with women voters, relatively speaking. What can we do? And it's, well, we got a golf pro, we got the golf manager, Doral, which is big. And then we've got Hulk Hogan, and then a UFC guy who is assaulted his wife on tape. That is the programming tonight.
I have to say I'm pretty puzzled by the programming decisions tonight. There have been moments this week where it actually did feel like the party was specifically targeting elements of the electorate that they are weak with, right?
Yes.
That they have had a number of African American, Latino speakers. They have had moms who talk about the plague of drugs and talk about how their families have been impacted by inflation and things like that. But tonight, which should be the climax of the convention, it's the moment when Donald Trump is going to accept the nomination. Traditionally, this is when you have by far the most viewers. They're having Tucker Carlson and Hulk Hogan and Kid Rock. It feels like a lot of dissonance with what was supposed to be this message of broadening the tent and unifying the country. I mean, whether you ever thought that was real, it certainly seemed like the campaign was telegraphing that, and I don't see a lot of evidence of that in the programming decisions tonight. We'll see how it goes.
I mean, George, this makes Clint Eastwood's empty chair look like a major headlining act. Yeah. And I guess Republicans have never, with all due respect to all Republicans and former Republicans, have never been at the sort of front of the cultural vanguard, right? But the atrophy on that level and to just be in this bunker of cultural insignificance again, golf pros from Trump Doral, they can't get anybody who is part of mainstream culture to be a part of this showcase this evening.
Right, it's a freak show. And it is just, I don't understand, as McKay said, I don't understand who they're trying to appeal to here. I really don't. I mean, I think that
Men. Young men.
I guess men, but
men and young men.
Men and young men.
But they don't even have PGA Tour win. You know what I mean? It's like.
But UFC is not. UFC is mainstream.
We'll give them UFC. We'll give them UFC. But again, this is introducing someone who is going to be accepting the Republican presidential nomination for the third time. They've done this 3 times before, and rather than building support in any kind of cultural sphere, it is atrophied to the point that literally an employee at your golf course is introducing you.
Well, also Hulk Hogan and Donald Trump feels like a fever dream someone might have told you when you were
that Nick Denton
in
had.
or in 1989.
Sure,
it's incredible. Hulk Hogan and Donald Trump at the RNC.
Yeah.
This is where we're at.
This is where we're at. Incredible.
George Conway, hang around. We have much more to talk to you about, including your new PAC.
Okay.
McKay Coppins from the Fiserv Arena, thank you for giving us perspective and wisdom. We really appreciate your time, my friend.
MSNBC special coverage of the final night of the RNC is just getting started. And there's a scheduled line in the program tonight on the same question we have been asking all year. Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? We'll have the answer. They're trying to pretend away. Next.
We in the Republican Party.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.